At 18, she was forced to marry a fat alpha king, but on wedding night, he revealed why he chose her. Elora had always dreamed of freedom. In the quiet halls of her family's manor, she would often wander the garden at dusk, letting the wind lift her hair as she imagined distant lands, wild forests, and skies untouched by royal decree. She had just turned 18, the age when girls of her status were expected to marry, to give their family alliances wealth and status. But Elara had never imagined her fate would be decided by a crown she had never seen, by a king she had never met, and by a destiny she had never chosen. The message arrived on a cold morning. A sealed scroll, its wax bearing the mark of the kingdom of Werewolf, summoned her to the royal castle. Her father, pale and uneasy, refused to meet her eyes as he handed it over.
Elara the king.
He has chosen you, he said quietly, as if the words themselves could summon a curse. You must go. There is no choice. Elora's fingers trembled as she broke the seal. The words were simple yet crushing. She was to marry King Kale, ruler of Werewolf, a man whose reputation was whispered in fear across the lands. He was large, commanding, and known for his temper, but also for his strange, almost magical control over the forces that stirred in the kingdom's shadows. The thought of being bound to him made her stomach twist in dread. She spent the next days in silence, preparing for the journey. Her mother tried to soothe her.
Elara, this is honor. Kings do not choose lightly.
Perhaps he sees greatness in you that we do not. Elara wanted to scream. Greatness? She had wanted nothing more than to study the forest herbs, to walk among the trees and birds, to laugh without fear. Now she was to be chained by gold and stone, by politics and a man whose name made even soldiers avert their eyes. The carriage ride to Werewolf was long and silent. Outside, the landscape changed from rolling hills to jagged cliffs, forests dense and dark, the sky above often heavy with storm clouds. The castle of Werewolf rose like a shadowed giant, towers reaching into the gray heavens, walls carved from black stone that gleamed wet with the river mist. The closer she came, the more she felt the air thicken, as if the castle itself was alive, breathing, and waiting. When she arrived, the court was already buzzing with curiosity. Noble families whispered, eyes flicking toward her as if she were an object of study. Servants hurried about, their faces pale as they whispered warnings. "The king does not suffer fools. His patience is thin. Be careful, girl."
Elara's heart pounded. She had imagined many things about this moment, but none prepared her for the grandeur of the throne hall.
Shadows clung to the high arches, and torches flickered against the walls, making them seem to pulse with a life of their own. And there, at the center of it all, sat King Kale. He was larger than she had imagined. His presence filled the room like a storm, even in silence. His eyes were dark, but not cruel. They held something heavier, something almost sorrowful, as if he carried the weight of the mountains on his shoulders. His gaze fell upon her, sharp and measuring, and she felt, for the first time, that he could see not just her appearance, but the thoughts she tried desperately to hide. The ceremony was swift and formal. Words were spoken, vows were made, and yet beneath the layers of silk and gold, a quiet tension hummed. Elora's hands shook as she took Kael's, a hand that was unexpectedly warm, almost gentle. And in that instant she realized something. This was not a man who married for convenience, nor for the political favor she had assumed. There was something deeper, hidden in the shadow of his silence. The nobles murmured among themselves, their eyes full of judgment and curiosity. Some whispered that she was too young, too naive. Others questioned Kael's choice, mocking his size and rumored temper. Elara felt a flush of shame and anger, but Kael remained still, his gaze on her unyielding, as if daring anyone to speak against the bond they were about to forge. That evening she was led to the bridal chambers, a room grand and cold, draped in tapestries that told the kingdom's long and bloody history. The bed was wide and heavily carved, the sheets dark silk, and the air smelled faintly of candle wax and old stone. She sat on the edge, hands clasped tightly in her lap, as the door opened and Cale entered. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink around him. His presence was overwhelming, not because of his size, but because of the intensity in his eyes. He did not smile, did not offer comfort. He merely looked at her, and Elara felt exposed, as if he could see every secret thought, every fear she had kept locked away. "I have waited a long time for this night," he said finally, his voice deep, calm, but not unkind.
"But not for the reasons you think." Elara blinked. "What do you mean?" she asked, though her voice trembled.
Cale stepped closer, and she saw it then, the shadow that lingered around him, subtle and unnatural, like the darkness of a forest at midnight. It was not malice, but a warning. "I did not choose you for beauty, nor for obedience, nor for alliance. I chose you because you carry something rare, something necessary, something only you can offer." Her heart raced. She had expected pride, cruelty, desire. But this, a weight pressed down on her chest. I don't understand," she whispered. Cale's gaze softened, ever so slightly, and for a moment, the fear that had clung to her like a cloak began to stir into something else. A strange curiosity, a fragile hope. "There is a curse on my bloodline," he said quietly, "a shadow that has haunted my family for generations. Kings before me have tried to lift it and failed. Only someone with your blood, your essence, can break it." Elara's mind spun. Curse? Bloodline? Magic? She had heard whispers of the supernatural in Werewolf, ghosts wandering the halls, spirits that could not rest, but never thought she would be part of it.
Me?
"You want me to?" Kael's expression was unreadable.
"I do not ask lightly," he said.
Nor do I offer comfort, but I needed you, Elara. You are the key.
The air between them was thick, heavy, with unspoken fear and possibilities. Elara wanted to retreat, to run into the night, to escape this fate she had never chosen. But she could not. Something in Cale's eyes, something beyond command or power, made her pause. It was not cruelty she saw there. It was desperation, and perhaps, beneath it, a loneliness so deep it mirrored her own. That night, as the candles burned low and the castle settled into an uneasy quiet, Elara lay in the bed, staring at the dark ceiling. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet every fiber of her being was tangled in the mystery that was Cale. She thought of the curse, of the destiny thrust upon her, and of the strange pull she felt toward a man she barely knew. And then, the sound came. A soft, deliberate knock at the door. Cale's voice followed, low, carrying through the silence like a shadow in the candlelight. "Elara, come closer." Things the crown demands, and things my heart cannot bear alone. Elara's hand trembled as she rose. The door opened, and there he stood, larger than life, yet somehow fragile, in the glow of the fading firelight. The shadows moved with him, almost alive, yet his eyes were fixed entirely on her. "I will not force you," he said, "but you must understand, the choice is not yours alone. Not tonight. Not ever. You were chosen because you are capable of what others cannot endure."
Her throat tightened.
She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to flee, but the weight of the moment pressed her into silence. She realized with a shock that she did not fear him entirely, not yet. She feared what might happen if she failed him, and beneath that fear something new stirred, a curiosity, a spark of courage, and perhaps the first faint trace of trust. The night stretched on, the silence heavy and full of unspoken words. Outside, the wind howled through the castle towers, and somewhere deep within, the shadows of old magic stirred. Elara knew, with a certainty that made her shiver, that her life had changed forever. The king had chosen her for reasons she did not yet understand, and she would have to face them whether she wanted to or not. And then, as the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, Kael leaned closer, his voice a mere whisper. Rest, Elara. Tomorrow you will learn why destiny chose you, and why I chose you too. For the first time in her life, Elara felt the weight of a world she could not escape, and the pull of a man she did not yet know, but could not ignore. The morning sun crept over the jagged towers of Werewolf Castle, but its light struggled to pierce the heavy gray clouds hanging above. Elara woke in the bridal chamber, her mind spinning with the king's words from the night before. A curse, a destiny, a bloodline power she had never known she carried. She felt both terrified and strangely drawn to it. As she dressed in the simple garments provided by the castle attendants, a servant quietly entered to deliver breakfast.
"Your Grace," the woman said softly, bowing.
"The king wishes to see you in the council room." Elara's stomach tightened. She had not slept well, and the weight of the castle felt heavier than ever.
I am coming, she said, trying to steady her voice. She could feel the pull of Kael's presence even before she entered the hall. The council room was enormous, with high ceilings and walls lined with ancient tapestries depicting kings and queens, battles fought long ago, and dragons long dead, or so the stories said. Kael was already there, standing by a window looking out over the mountains. He did not turn as she entered, yet the air seemed to shift, charged with a quiet tension. "Elara," he said without turning, his voice calm but firm. "You must understand the rules of this place. The castle, the kingdom, even I am bound by forces beyond our sight. The curse that haunts my bloodline is old. It has taken the lives of those closest to me, and it waits for the one who can break it." "Ah, I don't understand," she admitted. "How can I help?"
"I'm just—"
"You are just what is needed," Kael interrupted gently. "More than just a girl. You carry the line that can end this, but it will not be simple nor safe. You will be tested, Elara. Not by me, but by the curse itself." She felt a shiver run down her spine. Tests. Magic. Shadows that waited in the corners of the castle. Everything she had feared about Werewolf suddenly seemed real. And yet, she could not look away from the figure of the king, standing so tall, so imposing, yet somehow weary, as if the weight of the kingdom pressed on his broad shoulders. "I want to understand," she said finally, her voice firmer. "I want to try." Kael turned, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes she had not seen before. Relief. Not joy, not affection. Relief. "Very well," he said. "Then we begin." He led her through the corridors of the castle to the Hall of Ancestors, a place few dared to enter. Shadows clung to the walls, and the air was thick with the scent of old stone and candle wax. Torches flickered, and the light cast strange shapes across the floor. "This hall," Kael said, his voice echoing softly, "is where the bloodline of Werewolf has always faced the curse. Your power, your essence will be tested here first. You must confront not only the shadows in this castle, but also the shadows within yourself." Elara's heart raced. She wanted to ask what this meant, but the intensity in Kael's gaze silenced her. He gestured for her to stand in the center of the hall. The torches dimmed, and the shadows lengthened, curling like living things around her feet. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, she felt a cold wind brush her face, and a soft whispering filled the room. Voices, faint and urgent, calling names she did not know, telling stories of pain and loss. The shadows seemed to move, twisting into shapes she could not recognize. Her hands shook, and she took a step back. "Breathe," Kale said, his voice steady and grounding. "Do not let fear control you. The curse tests courage as much as power." Alara closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. She tried to focus on the warmth of Kale's presence behind her, the steadying weight of his voice. Slowly, the whispers began to fade, replaced by a different sensation, a pull, not outward but inward, towards something deep within herself, a spark, a memory of courage she had never known she possessed. She opened her eyes. The shadows writhed, forming shapes of sorrow and loss. They reached toward her, but she did not falter. Instead, she held out her hand, and a soft golden light shimmered from her palm, faint but persistent. The shadows recoiled. Kale's eyes widened slightly.
"You see it, don't you? Your power is real, Elara. But this is only the beginning." Exhausted but determined, Alara nodded.
She felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She had faced the first test of the curse, and survived. Over the next days, Kale guided her through lessons she had never imagined. He taught her the history of the curse, of the kings who had tried and failed to lift it. He taught her how to sense the strange energies in the castle, how to control her own, how to channel her fear into strength. And all the while, there was tension between them. Not of anger or hate, but of something sharper, more electric. When Kale corrected her, his hand brushing hers by accident, a spark seemed to jump through her. When she defied him, just slightly, she caught the flicker of admiration in his eyes. They were trapped in a dance neither had named, bound by duty and danger, yet swaying with the faint pull of something neither fully understood. One evening, as storm clouds gathered outside, the castle seemed to groan under the weight of the wind. Elara was in the Hall of Ancestors again, practicing, when the shadows grew darker, moving faster, reaching closer. She stumbled, fear threatening to take hold, when Kale appeared beside her. "Steady," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch was grounding. She looked up into his eyes and saw not just the king, but the man. A man burdened by centuries of fear, sorrow, and expectation. "They will not stop," he said quietly. "The curse is patient. It waits for failure. But so long as you stand, Alara, so long as you face it, there is hope." Hope. The word felt strange on her tongue. She had spent so long feeling trapped, helpless, that she almost forgot it existed. Yet standing there, with the wind howling outside and the shadows pressing in, she realized that hope, fragile and trembling, had taken root inside her. Suddenly, the shadows surged. They were stronger, faster, more desperate. Elara felt herself being pushed backward, fear clawing at her mind. She tried to summon the light, but it flickered, weak and unsteady. Panic rose like fire in her chest. Kaal reacted instantly. He stepped in front of her, holding his hand high, and the shadows recoiled, hissing like wind through dead leaves. His voice rang out firm and commanding, and yet beneath it was something else. A plea, a trust.
"Focus, Elara," he said. "Do not fight alone.
Trust yourself, and trust me." Something inside her shifted. She drew a deep breath, feeling Kale's presence beside her, steady and unwavering. The light flared from her hands, brighter, stronger, and the shadows shrieked, twisting, then dissolving into nothing. They both sank to the floor, exhausted, breathless, hearts racing. Alara's hands still glowed faintly, a soft warmth lingering where her power had touched the world.
You did it," Kale said, awe breaking through his usual calm. "You are stronger than even I imagined."
I didn't do it alone," she said, glancing at him. "You guided me."
Outside, the storm raged, but inside the hall, there was a quiet calm. The first test of the curse was over, but both knew it was only the beginning. The castle was alive with secrets, shadows, and power that neither fully understood, and yet something unspoken had passed between them. A recognition, a bond, fragile but undeniable. That night, as Elara lay in her chamber, she could not sleep. The events of the day replayed in her mind. The shadows, the power, the king's steady presence beside her. She realized, with a mixture of fear and wonder, that Kale was not just her king. He was her guide, her protector, and perhaps something more. She did not fully understand what that more meant. Love? Respect? Loyalty? All of it seemed tangled together, difficult to separate. But one thing was certain. She could not turn away. She could not escape the pull of destiny that had brought her to Werewolf, nor the man who carried it with her. And deep within the castle, in a hall she had not yet dared to enter, the shadows stirred once more. They whispered her name, soft but persistent, as if reminding her that the curse was patient and that her journey had only just begun. Elara shivered, drawing her blankets around her. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new trials, new dangers, and new revelations, and she would face them, whether she was ready or not. For now, though, she closed her eyes, letting sleep take her, even as a small spark of courage and curiosity burned quietly in her chest. The king had chosen her for a reason, and she would discover why, come shadow, storm, or secret magic of the ancient castle. The morning air was cold and sharp as Elara stepped onto the castle terrace. Storm clouds still lingered over the mountains, casting the world in shades of gray, and the wind tugged at her cloak, threatening to pull her into the void below. Yet today, she felt a strange determination. She had survived her first true encounter with the curse, faced the shadows, and found a spark of power within herself. And though the castle still felt alive with whispers, something else stirred too. Something tied to the presence of King Kale. Kale stood near the edge of the terrace, looking out over the dark forest that stretched for miles. His broad frame seemed even more imposing against the stormy sky. But there was a quiet in him now, a calm that contrasted with the tempest around them.
Elara approached cautiously, feeling the weight of their unspoken connection.
"You're awake early," he said without turning, his voice low, almost private. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted.
Too many thoughts, too many shadows. He finally turned to look at her, and Elara felt her heart tighten. There was something in his gaze, intense, unyielding, but not threatening. He studied her as if he could see every fear, every doubt, every hidden corner of her mind.
"The shadows will test you again," he said quietly. "And soon."
Are you ready? Elara hesitated. The memory of the Hall of Ancestors, the cold wind, the whispers, and the dark figures rising to meet her courage still haunted her. I think so, she said. I want to try. Kale nodded once, sharply, then motioned for her to follow. They walked through the winding corridors of the castle, past halls lined with faded banners and rooms filled with ancient relics. The castle felt alive, almost breathing, and Elara could sense the subtle pulse of magic that lingered in the stones themselves.
"Today," Kale said as they entered a smaller, shadowed chamber, "you will face a trial unlike any before. The curse will not just test your power.
It will test your mind, your courage, and your heart. You must trust yourself, and trust me."
Elara's chest tightened.
The words stirred a strange emotion within her, a mix of fear and something she could not name. She had never trusted anyone like this before, certainly not someone as commanding and mysterious as the king. But she could feel the weight of his presence beside her, solid and unwavering, and it gave her courage she did not know she had. The trial began almost immediately. Shadows rose from the floor, darker and more fluid than before, twisting into shapes of people, faces she had never seen, yet filled with sorrow and longing. They circled her, reaching, whispering her name. Panic threatened to take hold, but she remembered Kale's words. She took a deep breath, raising her hands, and summoned the golden light she had begun to control. It flared weakly at first, then stronger, as she focused on her courage. But the shadows were clever. They did not strike openly. Instead, they attacked her mind, filling her with visions of failure, of Kale falling into danger, of the castle consumed by darkness. Elara stumbled, almost collapsing, until Kale stepped forward. "Steady, Elara," he said firmly, placing a hand lightly on her arm. The warmth of his touch grounded her, and she felt the panic recede slightly. "Remember what I taught you. You are stronger than the fear." The shadows hissed and recoiled, as if sensing the bond forming between them. Elara raised her hands fully this time, focusing on her inner strength and the presence of the king beside her. A brilliant light burst from her palms, chasing the shadows back into the corners of the room. They shrieked and twisted, then dissolved into nothing. Elara sank to the floor, breathless. Kale knelt beside her, steadying her. "You did well," he said, softly. "Far better than I expected." She looked at him, feeling a rush of something she had never experienced before. Gratitude, admiration, and something more. Something tender that made her chest ache. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Kale's expression softened, but he did not speak. Instead, he helped her to her feet, and they left the chamber together. The castle felt quieter now, almost as if it were watching them with approval, but the shadows had not disappeared completely. They were patient, waiting for the next test. Over the following days, the lessons continued. Kale taught Elara how to sense the subtle magic in the castle, how to draw strength from her own fear, and how to channel her courage into power. He was patient, but firm, correcting her mistakes with a hand that lingered slightly longer than necessary, a gaze that held her attention even when she wished it would not. Elara began to notice things she had never paid attention to before. The faint tremor in Kale's hand when he thought no one was watching, the way his eyes softened when he spoke of the past, the quiet moments when he seemed almost fragile, hidden beneath his commanding presence. She realized that the man she had feared so much was not unfeeling or cruel. He was a man burdened by duty, cursed with power, and lonely in ways she could barely imagine. One evening, Kale called her to the library, a vast room filled with towering shelves and ancient tomes. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. "There is a place in the castle," he said, "where the curse is strongest. Few have dared enter it. Tonight, we will go there together." Elara's stomach twisted. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. "Together?" she asked, her voice small. Kale nodded. "I will not leave your side, but you must walk through it, not behind me." The curse respects strength, not protection. They walked through hidden corridors, the air growing colder with every step. The shadows here were darker, almost solid, and the silence was thick, broken only by the distant howl of wind through the towers. Elara felt a chill run through her body. Finally, they arrived at the chamber at the heart of the castle, a place few had survived. The door opened, and the darkness inside seemed to stretch infinitely. Shapes moved just beyond sight, whispering names, echoing memories, and weaving fears into the air. "You must face it alone," Kale said, though he remained close. "I will guide you, but the courage must come from within." Elara stepped forward, trembling. The shadows surged, swirling around her, filling her mind with visions of failure and loss. She faltered, almost giving in to panic, but Kale's voice reached her like a lifeline. "Remember what you are capable of," he said. She focused, drawing on the power she had begun to understand. Light blossomed from her hands, then spread to her heart, filling her with warmth and courage. The shadows shrieked and twisted, trying to engulf her, but she stood firm. Slowly, the darkness began to dissipate, retreating before her light. When the last shadow vanished, Elora sank to her knees, exhausted. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done well," he said softly. "Far better than I imagined." Elora looked at him, and for the first time she saw the man beneath the king, the man who had carried centuries of burden, loneliness, and fear. Her chest tightened with emotion she could not name. I did it, she whispered. "You did," he said, his voice gentle.
And yet this is only the beginning. The curse is patient.
It will test us again, and each time we will grow stronger. Together. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and danger. Elara realized that her bond with Kale was no longer just about duty or fear. Something deeper, something tender and complicated was forming between them. A connection forged in the crucible of shadow and fire. That night, as she lay in her chamber, Elara could not sleep. She thought of the shadows, the tests, and Kale's steady presence beside her. She realized that the man she had feared was becoming someone she could rely on, someone she could trust, perhaps even care for. And somewhere deep in the castle, the shadows stirred again, whispering her name, reminding her that the trials were far from over. Elara shivered, drawing her cloak closer around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and perhaps new truths about the king she had been forced to marry. But for the first time, she did not feel entirely afraid. She would face whatever came next, not alone, but with him. The castle was alive, full of secrets, shadows, and power that neither fully understood. And yet, in the darkness, Elara felt the first flicker of hope, a spark that perhaps, together, they could overcome the curse, the castle, and even the weight of destiny itself. The castle of Werewolf lay in uneasy silence as the dawn broke, the first weak light of morning spilling across the black stone towers. The storm of the past days had passed, but its shadow lingered in every hall, in every flicker of candlelight. Elara stood at the edge of the terrace, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, and gazed across the mountains, feeling both fear and resolve. Today she would face the final trial of the curse. Kale approached silently, his broad frame looming over her but softened by the quiet morning. He did not speak at first, merely standing beside her, as if sharing the weight of the coming day in silence. When he finally did, his voice was low, steady, and almost tender.
"Today, Elara, we will end this," he said, "but it will not be simple."
The curse is ancient, patient, and clever. It will test our courage, our strength, and our hearts. We must face it together, and we must trust each other completely.
Elara nodded, trying to steady her nerves.
She had learned so much since the day she arrived at the castle. How to control her power, how to face fear, how to confront the shadows that seemed to breathe in every corner. Yet she knew that today would be the ultimate test. The king led her through the winding corridors to the Hall of Ancestors, the place where the curse had first revealed itself to her. The torches along the walls flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the stone floor. The air felt heavier here, charged with a strange, almost electric energy. Kale opened the massive doors, and Elara gasped. The hall was transformed. Shadows moved like living things, twisting into dark shapes of people, creatures, and memories. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with power. The curse was aware of her presence, and it was ready. "You must step forward," Kale said. "The curse will test everything you are. Remember, Elara, your courage, your strength, and your heart are your weapons. Trust yourself, and trust me." Elara swallowed hard and stepped into the hall. The shadows surged immediately, circling her, whispering voices of fear and doubt. Faces from the past, unknown and sorrowful, stared at her, and for a moment, she felt herself faltering. "Focus," Kale called, his voice echoing through the hall. "Do not let fear take hold. You are stronger than it knows." Drawing a deep breath, Elara lifted her hands, summoning the light that had become her ally. The golden glow spread from her palms, filling the hall with warmth. The shadows hissed and recoiled, but they did not vanish. Instead, they grew taller, darker, more cunning, as if feeding on every flicker of doubt in her mind. One shape, taller and more solid than the rest, advanced toward her. Its face was indistinct, but the aura of sorrow and anger was overwhelming. Elara stumbled, her courage wavering. In that moment, Kale stepped forward, placing a firm hand on her arm. "You are not alone," he said, his voice low and unwavering. "I am here. We face this together." The touch grounded her, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her. She was not just a girl facing shadows. She was a force, a partner to the king who had chosen her for reasons she was only beginning to understand. With renewed strength, she raised her hands again, the light from her palms merging with the energy that seemed to flow from Kale himself. The shadows shrieked and twisted, but gradually they began to dissolve. The taller shape reached toward her one last time, and Elara focused all her courage, all her determination, and all the power she had cultivated since arriving at the castle. The golden light blazed brighter than ever, and the figure vanished in a burst of warmth. Elara sank to her knees, exhausted, as Kale knelt beside her, steadying her. You did it," he said softly, awe and relief in his voice.
We did it!
She corrected, smiling weakly through her exhaustion.
Together!
Kale's gaze met hers, and in that moment, the bond between them became undeniable. It was not fear, nor duty, nor obligation that tied them together. It was trust, respect, and a fragile, growing affection that neither could deny. But the test was not yet over. The hall shivered, as if the castle itself were taking a deep breath. A final shadow, vast and dark, rose from the center of the room. It was heavier than the others, more solid, more menacing, though it lacked a face. The curse's last form, the final obstacle. Elara rose slowly, holding Kale's hand.
We face it together, she said. Kale nodded. Together, he agreed.
The shadow surged toward them, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, as one, Elara and Kale channeled their power, light intertwining with shadow, courage. The room shook, the walls quivering, the torches flickering violently. Yet they did not falter. Elara's mind was filled with visions of the past, kings and queens, soldiers and citizens, all lost to the curse. But she did not panic. She focused on the bond between herself and Kale, on the trust they had built, and on the hope that had been planted in her heart from the very beginning. The shadow shrieked, a sound that filled the hall with darkness, and then, as their combined power surged, it began to break apart. Pieces of darkness dissolved into light, and finally, with a blinding brilliance, the last shadow vanished. The hall fell silent. Elara and Kale stood trembling but victorious. The curse, centuries in the making, had been broken. The air felt lighter, the shadows gone, and the weight that had pressed on the castle and its inhabitants seemed to lift. Kale turned to her, his expression unreadable for a moment, then softening. "It is done," he said quietly. "The curse is no more." "We did it," she said again, her voice trembling with relief and awe. Kale stepped closer, his large frame towering over her, yet there was no intimidation in his presence now, only warmth, respect, and something tender that made her heart race.
You have grown stronger than even I imagined, he said, and not just in power.
In courage, in heart. You have changed everything, Elara. For yourself. And for me. Elara looked up at him, feeling a strange mix of awe and emotion. And for us? She asked softly. Kale's gaze softened further, and he took her hand in his.
Yes, he said, his voice low and steady. For us, the bond we have formed, it is more than duty.
It is trust. It is choice. And I hope it can be more than that too. A warmth spread through Elara's chest. For so long she had feared the castle, the curse, and the man she had been forced to marry. But now, standing here with him, she realized that the fear had been replaced by something stronger, a sense of belonging, of partnership, and the faint, thrilling stirrings of affection. The castle, once cold and threatening, now felt alive in a different way. Its halls no longer whispered with shadows of dread, but seemed to hum with energy, as if acknowledging the bond between the king and the young woman who had faced the impossible and survived. Over the following days, the castle began to transform as well. Where shadows had lingered, light now found a way. The guards moved with less tension, the servants with less fear, and even the winds through the towers seemed gentler. Elara and Kale walked together through the corridors, speaking quietly, planning for the future of the kingdom, and learning more about each other with every passing moment. Kale taught Elara not just to wield her power, but to understand it, to see the responsibility and the potential it carried. Elara taught Kale patience and humility, showing him that strength could be paired with compassion, that leadership did not require fear alone. And in their shared experiences, their bond deepened. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Kale led Elara to the castle terrace. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the shadows of the towers stretch across the land.
You have changed my life, Kale said quietly, and not just because of the curse.
You have reminded me that even a king can need another, can rely on another, and can find hope again.
Elara turned to him, her eyes reflecting the dying light of the sun. And you have changed mine, she said. You have shown me courage, strength, and trust. I never thought I could feel safe here, but with you, I do. Kale reached for her hand, holding it gently. Then let us face the future together, he said. Not because of duty, not because of a curse, but because we choose each other. Elara's heart soared. For the first time in her life, she felt a freedom she had never known. A freedom not from responsibility, but from fear. She had faced the shadows, faced the curse, faced the unknown, and found that courage, trust, and choice could be stronger than any darkness. As night fell over the castle, they stood side by side, hands entwined, looking out over the kingdom that stretched beneath them. The wind whispered through the towers, carrying with it a sense of peace, of endings, and new beginnings. The curse was broken. The shadows were gone. And for the first time, Elara and Kale faced the future not as king and unwilling bride, but as partners, equals, and perhaps something even more. And though the world outside remained uncertain, full of challenges, the darkness could no longer claim them. Together they had found strength, trust, and the beginnings of love. Together they would face whatever came next. For the first time in their lives, both knew the future belonged to them, not to shadows, not to curses, not to fear, but to choice, to courage, and to each other.